On this episode, I'm speaking with Charles Thompson, account executive at Experian. Charles has been selling in some form for the last 7 years and has found himself in the multifamily space for the last year. He sees sales as serving and loves that it can enable him to create and build meaningful and educational relationships. His difficult early life experiences now inform his personal brand, enabling him to communicate a story with others so they see him first as a person with a family, interests, and passions, and as a salesperson second. Charles is the father of 4 and resides with his wife and family in San Diego, California. Without further ado, let's jump into my conversation with Charles. Charles, thank you so much for joining me. I'm glad that we're having this opportunity.
Likewise, I appreciate being on the podcast.
Well, let's jump right in. You told me a couple of weeks ago that you've had actually a really tough upbringing compared to many. And when I first heard the story, I was like, man, that's really, it sets into perspective for me where you are today with your journey as a professional. And I kind of just love digging into background with people too. So I'd love it if you would start off and tell us that story, tell the listeners about that, and whatever you're comfortable sharing, please dive in.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm one of 5, the second youngest. And, I grew up in a household that was full of drugs and gangs. I would say the majority of the men in my family were in gangs of some sort. And my dad was not really around in my life, so I don't have a ton of memories around my interaction with dad. But it really, what I do recall is like my older brother, older cousins, they were in gangs, they were doing drugs. My sister, the same thing, and we kind of lived a free kind of life where we can do whatever we really wanted to.
Mm,
I probably would have been in some kind of aspect of drugs or gangs if it wasn't for sports. And for me specifically, that was football. So I remember specifically at 8 years old, I sat down and I told myself, "Hey, I can't do drugs or be in a gang because I'm going to be in the NFL." Now, Chris, we're here talking on a podcast, and I'm not in my $1 million mansion, so we know that that didn't happen. But that
right.
that conviction, that belief as an 8 year old, was enough to really keep me out of a lot of trouble from time to time as my life was teetering to some of those bad decisions.
Mm. Yeah. In speaking to some of those teeterings towards those bad decisions, one of the things that you had mentioned to me was, I'm a fan of tattoos. Don't get me wrong. I have some
Yeah,
tattoos myself, but
yeah,
you mentioned that when you were about 11 years old, your mom asked you if you wanted to get a tattoo. And my jaw kind of dropped. I was like,
yeah,
what, really?
yeah, yeah,
And so I know that as you were a young kid kind of growing up, you were sort of faced with these kind of awkward and not, 11-year-old decisions in your life. And it sounds like football ultimately became this silver lining for you. It kind of helped you with your involvement in school, which I know we'll get there as well.
sure.
But when you got into football, was it any particular aspect of the game that got you feeling like you were on the right track, be it like coaches or fellow teammates or just the organization of it?
Good question. I would say at the time, no, right? 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. Didn't really have any insight there. But as I look back, I see the common thread was always coaches. Now, the hard part to really discern or delineate at this time was, did they did they did coaches give me more attention because I was a little bit better than some of the other athletes? Did they genuinely care? Was it a combination of the two? Who knows? But what I couldn't tell you is that I can look at different um, markers in my life and see coaches who would sit me aside and say, "Charles, stop being a knucklehead," who would take me to go grab a bite when there maybe wasn't food in the house, who could be a couch to sleep on when there might be unrest in the household. Um, even more specifically, there was a point in time in my life from sophomore year to senior year where I lived with a coach, right? And I for those 2 years I lived with a coach, and I'm from San Diego, I remember when I went to college all the time, and I might be going a little bit too far here, Chris, but I remember when I went to college on the East Coast, everyone was like, "Hey, yeah, like Charles is from San Diego. He has a butler." And they would always, make fun of me and have a butler because San Diego is known with opulence and very wealthy people. But little did they know that my household was such that I lived with a coach because I was sleeping on a couch at my mom's house as a high schooler,
Mm,
and there was in a two-bedroom apartment. There's 10 to 12 people there, and just to even have a square spot to do your homework was difficult. So
yeah.
that was a little bit of just how I saw coaches play in my life. But I apologize, Chris, if I went a little bit too far.
No, no, not at all. Not at all. Kind of tying back to the doing the homework piece, you mentioned to me that there came a point when you were just kind of pulling in C's, maybe the occasional D here and there, kind of
Sure.
like not super focused on the schooling aspect of it. But this was actually a point where you recalled getting grounded for the entirety of spring break because of your performance, and that was like a wake up call for you.
Yeah.
What was that moment for you like, and kind of what were the circumstances around it?
Yeah. So this is a story that always sticks into my head because this was the moment, this was the day that I found out that there were two forms of disseminating information as far as your report cards. So the first one, obviously, was I got it in my hand from my teacher, and I crumpled it into my backpack and said that no human being will ever witness what has occurred on
Yep.
this paper. And there was D's, C's, F's all aboard. Um, and so I, put that somewhere safe where no one could ever see it. And I, get back home and it's Friday, spring break is about to unleash. And then my mom comes to me and says, "Hey, I just got your report card. And guess what? You're grounded for the entirety of spring break." Well, my first thought is immediately like I've been ratted out. Someone has told on me. And so I go run back to that secret, safe spot and find my beautifully crumpled, report card there. And that's when I found out that, oh, teachers realize that there's shady kids who probably won't show their report cards to their parents, so they send it to them. And but that story for me was very simple. I had C's, D's, and F's not because I struggled academically. It was just I just didn't do my homework. And if you look at most public school systems in middle school, high school, you do your homework, you get a B. So for me, I turned in a bunch of missing assignments. My teachers were very gracious, and those grades went up, within a couple of weeks of
Mm,
going back to school. But that was a super easy lesson to me, or hard or easy lesson, how you think about it. That if I want certain things, and that certain thing for me was to enjoy spring break freely, that there's certain things I need to do. And it taught me a lesson that my mom's always told me that, you're free to do whatever you want, but you're not free to choose your consequences. And and that has stuck to me forever. So
mm.
after that day, like school was always easy for me. School was never an issue for me, and I think I was pretty blessed to learn that at that age because most of the athletes I was around and the situations I was in um, really struggled academically, really struggled to get to the places they wanted to go. So although they might have been a really good athlete, academically there was a lot of doors closed to them because they couldn't figure out that
Yeah.
piece of the puzzle.
So I want to jump ahead to your recruitment at Stanford because I think that's a really cool part of this story. Things start to
Sure.
change for you.
Yeah.
It's a unique kind of wandering journey at the same
Yeah.
time. So
Yeah.
what? Actually, let me back up before we jump in because I remember you telling me that part of this story had to do with like a locational awareness thing. So let's actually start there because I think
Yeah.
that's a great tee up.
Yeah. 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 So football always was a part of my life, and as a junior, I started realizing that there might be a possibility that football could actually, really open up some real doors for me as far as college. So Stanford starts to recruit me, Stanford. And this was a little bit before like they rose to the prominence that they are today, right? So they weren't quite as a household name as they are today. They were probably more akin to like Ivy League schools, which may help you understand why I'm going to say what I say next. So, it comes to the point in athletics, if you're not aware for the listeners, there's a point in time when a school recruits you, you typically have an official visit. And that official visit is you go to the campus on a formal level, you are wine and dined by the coaches, and you get to go see the facilities, so on and so forth. So that happens for me for Stanford, right? Where Stanford, wants me to go and visit. But I'm very, very ignorant of all things colleges. I'm kind of confused that I even have an opportunity to go to college. And I think Stanford's in on the East Coast. I thought they were Ivy League. And so I was completely confused that they were just up north. I'm from San Diego, in Palo Alto, and I realized that the Ivy League, if you didn't know this, listener, they're just a sports conference, just like the Pac-12 or the Mountain West or the Big Ten. They're just a conference who happen to have really intelligent schools in there. And so I thought, oh, Stanford's a really good academic school. They must be an Ivy League, and they also must be on the East Coast. To my surprise, that I was very ignorant, and they are just about a couple-hour flight up north. And so that was my first experience with Stanford, and really, uh, just piggyback on how ignorant I was. Typically there's a couple of things I didn't know. I didn't know Stanford was in California, and I didn't know that when you take your ACT or SAT, there should be a timing in which you take that. And for me, I took my SAT as a junior in college, actually as a senior in high school. I apologize. And because I took it so late in the game, there's a thing called the national letter sign of intent. So you sign to the school that you think you're going to be recruited to. Well, you need to take your SAT or ACT prior to that. And if you
Mm,
don't, then it's hard to sign. They make that difficult. And I was in a place where I only took it one time, my senior year, which pretty much put me out of the runnings for Stanford because I didn't do great on the SAT on my first go around. And most of the kids I knew, as I asked, uh, after I understood, they were taking their SAT as a sophomores in high school,
mhm.
and that gave them plenty of time to study, retake, and go plan for the test. And I took it once before my national, sign of letter of intent. So that's one thing. Those are a couple things I learned, just my experience, interacting with the Stanford.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Transforming Cities, brought to you by Authentic. Authentic delivers premier multifamily brand experiences and smart digital marketing. Our proven approach aims to accelerate leasing velocity, boost rental rates, and increase long-term value. Simply put, we see brand as a business asset. You can find out more at authenticff.com.
Yeah.
And so you ended up not going to Stanford necessarily. You didn't
Yep.
have the score to get into to Stanford at the time.
Yeah.
But you told me they gave you an option to go to a prep school, and so
Yeah.
kind of that one thing led to another. There, you did end up playing football collegiately, which is really cool.
Yeah.
Where did you end up, and kind of what did you end up studying while you were also playing ball?
Yeah, they didn't end up going to Stanford, but the coach, Lance Anderson, still remember the guy, very nice guy. Introduced me to another coach at Bucknell University. Most folks on the West Coast may have never heard of it, but some of the Northeast listeners may be aware. Um, in Pennsylvania, about an hour away from Penn State College. Played football there, played running back. Enjoyed it, great time, played all 4 years. I actually studied business, which is very vague. Everyone knows that it's
Yeah.
very general. Then I minored in religion and philosophy, and really enjoyed my time there. As I was considering, or as I was graduating, I was trying to figure out what am I going to do? What's that going to look like? How's that going to pan out? And I didn't really have any strong desires to do anything specifically. And a part of that is like business is so general, right? You could literally do anything
Yeah.
with a business degree. So I started considering and thinking about what could be possible opportunities and avenues. And someone reached out to me about Teach for America. And Teach for America is this program that takes college graduates and pretty much puts them in pretty rough areas and allows them to essentially help out that school system with new blood. A lot of it's just like, hey, it's energy because you don't know a ton. You just graduate from college and you don't have a
Mm.
teaching credential. And in that time, they allow you to go earn a teaching credential and possibly go be a teacher in that school area. And so I was thinking about doing that. I was in a final interview. It's actually a really rigorous interview process. But one of the things that they were very specific on is that they wanted to take you into very high risk areas like Detroit, right? And they happen to be open up a San Diego area. Now, San Diego, as many of you know, that it's pretty wealthy area, but there are some pockets that are struggling. And I really wanted to go to the San Diego branch because I have a younger brother, and I really wanted to be able to be around him. He's about 8, 9 years younger than I am. So at that time, I'm like 21. He's just about getting to high school,
Yeah.
and really wanted to be a person to um, for him to look up to, and really be the person to him that I didn't really have. I didn't have my older brother wasn't really around. My dad wasn't really around for me at that time, and I wanted to be that for him. So when I was very specific and saying, "Hey, I really want to go to San Diego. I don't want to go to Detroit or Chicago or what have you. I want to be in San Diego." That pretty much put me out there running for that because they were like, "Hey, like there's more high risk areas than Carlsbad, California, and things like
Mhm.
that," and which
Yeah.
100% makes sense. And I'm being facetious. There's other bad places in San Diego, but that was kind of that took me on a path to like the nonprofit space because it really got me thinking about like what do I really want to do, and I've always thought about it this way. An ideal world with no bills, what would I do for free? That was really how I thought about what I wanted to do with my time. And I still try to think about that. In an ideal world with no bills, what would I do for free? I try to let that question guide what I do for work because
Mm.
I think that helps me in doing what I love and spending time on what I'm passionate about. And that led me to an organization called Fellowship of Christian Athletes, FCA, where really what I did there was I was a mentor, big brother to high school athletes. So I got to coach with them, I got to train with them, I got to mentor them, guide them on all things, spiritual, workouts to academic to just like, you know, you should, take a bath. Like all of that kind of stuff was really what I was doing at that time. And it was a rough job because it was right out of college, or there's a couple oddball jobs before that, but right out of college. And ultimately, what I like, they gave me this job, and they said, "Hey, Charles, you have a job, but guess what? You need to raise all the money that you'll get to live on." And I was like, "Well, that's not really a job if I have to like ask people for money to live." And I was kind of struggling. And around the same time, I'm about to get married and or ask my my now wife's father for her hand in marriage. And I'm thinking about how am I going to convince him that I can somehow take care of his daughter, and I don't even know if I'm going to have money. Like legitimately, like I have to
Right.
go ask people for money. And so those are all the turmoil that I was struggling at the time, but ended up raising around $200,000 in a couple years I was there, which was literally looking like, hey, reaching out to people like you, Chris, or businesses or churches or nonprofits, and basically asking them to support what I'm doing, and they can do that obviously on a one-time basis or on a monthly basis. And that was really the start of me getting my feet wet on some kind of salesy kind of
Mm.
um, interaction.
Yeah. No, I love all of that. I mean, it's clear how much you care about community, you care about giving back. I think it shines through in what you're doing today as well. Even if the sort of the shell of like where you work isn't necessarily, pointing to that directly, it's very clear that that is very important to you
Mm,
with the content that you share and the stories that you tell.
mm,
And obviously there came a point when you couldn't necessarily do that anymore. Your own family was growing. As you said, you got married, you started having a family. you couldn't be, as you told me, you couldn't be hanging out with the athletes after school when you needed to
Yeah.
be home, quote unquote,
Yeah.
after school, right? Like
Yeah.
to be with your family. So you're at Experian now, but I'd love to hear a little bit about some of those first sales jobs and what you found yourself in, kind of cutting your teeth during those first few years. Because I know it was a little bit all over the place, but I feel like in a roundabout way, you've really ended up in a place that makes sense. So the first one was Ernest Packing, of all places.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So Ernest Packaging, uh, fun company to really eccentric, weird people like myself. My wife tells me all the time like she would have hated that job. But the reason why it was because you sold boxes, so anything you would get in the mail from Amazon, the box, the bubble wrap, the peanuts, the tape on the box, I sold. And we differentiated ourselves with customer service. So not only did my wife tell me that she would hate that job, but she also made fun of me and said that I worked for Dunder Mifflin because
Perfect.
essentially I sold paper, and we differentiated ourselves from customer service. And so I was constantly getting made fun of by my wife, which was fun and hilarious. And at that time, believe it or not, I didn't really watch The Office, so I didn't
Oh man.
land as it should have. And then I've since watched it, and now it completely makes sense. And it probably would have been much more endearing if I would have known
Okay, well,
um,
real quick then,
at that
what's
time.
your favorite Dunder Mifflin scene, or what's a favorite Dunder Mifflin scene that comes to mind from the show over the
Oh,
years? Like,
good one. So I'm not as quotable as her. She could quote everything, but I would probably say, my favorite scene is the Dwight, Michael Scott, and Jim, and what is it called? Like I guess mock call that
oh yeah,
Dwight's doing with Michael Scott, and I guess in Jim, because Michael Scott kind of gets in there eventually. And to
hmm,
me that's like hilarious because
yeah,
I Michael Scott, Steve Carell, like that dude's like idiot. And right now, I I couldn't even imagine in 2023 90% of the stuff that they had said could even fly on TV today,
yeah,
because I
yeah.
look at him like, my goodness, I can't believe he said that.
Yeah, it
And
actually
so,
makes me think of a Michael Scott face thinking about thinking about some of the lines in that show for 2023, like just the cringe face of Michael
yes,
Scott.
yes. So, but I as a salesperson, I just think that it's hilarious because sometimes you get a manager in there who doesn't quite get it because they understand it, but they're not quite in the trenches anymore. And so Michael Scott is a funny as a salesperson. He's funny to me because he's really good at sales, and you see that from like the Applebee's scene and a couple other different things. But you can tell he's a little bit out of touch on a day to day because he's not in the trenches anymore. And so Dwight, obviously, another great salesman, Jim, great salesperson. But you can see that Jim was able to manipulate him because he's not really in the trenches. And obviously he was meant to
Right.
be comedic, things like that. But that's what you get a little bit in business, especially in sales, because usually the really good salespeople become managers. And but the thing about sales, in my opinion, that it's very difficult to be really good at it consistently the more you're out of it. You just can like you have to be in it.
Hmm.
And so you see that sometimes in just real life experiences with managers. And so I love that whole dynamic with Michael Scott because it's this constant like struggle with Michael Scott kind of being out of touch with sales, but also like randomly closing a huge deal as well.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like the whole dynamic of like Dunder Mifflin is super fun to see it because it's kind of like that in real life sometimes.
So how long did you were you in the Dunder Mifflin ecosystem at Ernest?
Ecosystem, yeah, 6 months, so a huge 6 months. And just so we're clear, like and you see this a little bit in the office, like they're driving and they're going into businesses. So that's what I was doing. I was in a car, I was door knocking business to business, right? So I would go visit 20 locations on a daily basis. And basically I would have a 2 week kind of rotation where I would go visit those businesses over and over and over. And the general kind of conception was that, that person, that business wasn't open to having a conversation with you until the seventh to 10th visit. That was like the general numbers that
Oh
you're getting.
wow.
So did that for that time. And that was, late October 2019 to like March 2020. And when I was there, it's a hard job. Like door knocking is not easy. So there was a lot of people who came in, a lot of people who came out as a result of the difficulty of the job. And I was fine. I was doing okay. I enjoyed it. To me, it was like an adventure every time I went out to go interact with people. So I liked it.
Yeah,
Um, but we all know what happened in March 2020.
we do.
So, um, like people are like selling toilet paper for hundreds of dollars. Like the world is
Hmm.
going like nuts. And
Hmm.
so not only that, but people are saying, Charles, I would rather you not come into my office. And so now I'm trying to think about, okay, I thought this was like H1N1. I thought would be okay after a week or two. It seems like this is a little bit different. And now I have to figure out where I'm at a company where their whole strategy outbound is to go to places and meet with them, to businesses and meet with people in person physically. How do I make money? How do I feed my kids? And that's like when I started to read the writing on the wall to some capacity and start to think about, hey, I might need to figure out something different. And that's when I had an opportunity for another company who was actually a little bit closer locally, and started working for them. And that was a company called IDIQ.
Before we jump into IDIQ, I have
Sure.
to call back something that made me think of one of my favorite scenes in The Office because I
Yeah.
can't put that to bed just quite yet.
Mhm.
But it was, you mentioned like going, driving around and going door to door. And I remember one of my favorite scenes in The Office is when Dwight and Jim are on a sales call together. They're driving around, like same setup. And in order for like Dwight to get fired up and stoked about the sale, he's like gets in the back seat and like turns on his like metal music or whatever it is, and he's like rocking out in the back seat and punching the headrest of the seat in front of him. That was one of my favorite all time scenes. I
Love it.
just imagine you now like getting hyped in the car,
I
like,
love it.
all right, man, let's go make the sale, let's make it
I love it.
happen.
I love it.
So,
And by
but
and
anyway,
by the way, I I music to me is like a hype thing to me. So
yeah.
whether I'm at like a sales call or like at a conference, like, and I know at a conference, like I'm going to go talk to like the guy, because that's why I like conferences, because everyone's accessible. The CEO who's been ignoring you for 6 months, they're right there, right?
Yep.
And you can go and talk to them, or you can go walk right past them and ignore them. And so music, I think, for me personally, plays a big factor in my life. And my quick question and then we can put it to rest for Dunder Mifflin. Is there any person or in the office or in Dunder Mifflin that you resonate the most with, as like that you feel like you are more like?
Oh my gosh, that's such a hard question. It's such a good question. Such a hard question though. I don't know, because I think a lot of people around me would probably say I'm more like a Jim, like kind of
Yeah,
chill, low
yeah,
key, maybe a
yeah,
little bit like thinks he knows what he's talking about all the time, but like sometimes he doesn't. But I also
yeah,
definitely have that Dwight piece where I need to get hyped up and I need to get
yeah,
fired up because I'm a little
yeah.
bit more of introverted personality, but I
Sure.
still love that too. Like turn on the music that just connects and like you're
Yeah,
ready to go, like you're ready to
yeah,
jump in and get after it. So
yeah.
good question. I would love that to be like a icebreaker question for most people.
Yeah, sorry, that was too much tangent. I just thought I'd ask that. I was like, oh, I've never asked that question. Might as well
No, it's
ask
great.
it.
So for IDIQ, I mean, we start to get to a place here in your journey where you're getting around to this aspect of credit, and obviously now you're kind of in the credit world as it relates to multifamily to some extent, which kind of brings us full circle. But when you had this opportunity with IDIQ, first of all, what is that company, and what was that world like for you as you were jumping into it?
Yeah. Good question. So Identity IQ, um, really IDIQ is their official name, but many know them by Identity IQ. And what they do is they sell credit products. And what I was doing while I was there, I was selling that B2B to C. So Um, some of the credit talks would be like credit monitoring that you see on a bunch of commercials, identity theft, credit score tracker, credit score simulators, things of that nature. If you have a Chase or a AAA or even Bank of America, you probably see some version of that. It wouldn't necessarily be IDIQ, but it's the same similar product behind that. That's what we were selling. So I was doing that B2B2C. So most of my job looked like was I would call financial advisors, credit repair companies, tax advisors, and basically say, hey, we would want to offer to your clients. I know cost to your business, our product. And when your clients enroll into that product, we'll pay you on a residual basis. And so
Mm,
the value proposition in there for them was, hey, um, you can have an additional source of revenue by your clients enrolling into this. And the value proposition for us was you have a relationship with your clients that I don't currently possess. So instead of me trying to find them and sell to them, how about they listen to someone they already trust and they already know, and you sell that to them. And that pretty much was the like
mm,
the the crux of the whole situation. Now the reality was that it was such a easy sell in the sense that if that person found that valuable, it could happen very quickly. So it really was a numbers game. So when I was at that job, I was like making 150, 200 cold calls on a day-to-day basis because it,
oof.
it was simply like a matter of like if I got to that person, um, and it was like it was alignment between their business and our business, it made a ton of sense because you're basically saying, hey, business, I will pay you for something that your clients are probably using already, and you're seeing no revenue from. And when it's that situation, and that's kind of like I would say sales in a very like simplistic sense, like you just dial and smile. That sells. And then as you
Yeah.
get to more complex sales, it's okay. Let's be more strategic in there. But for me, it was like I have all these people, financial advisors, tax advisors, credit repair businesses. Let's go reach out to them and let's go see if I can get them on the phone. If I can get them on the phone, I can close them.
Yeah. And this was a time when, from my knowledge of your story, LinkedIn really started to come into play. Obviously, it's a
Sure,
platform that you've gained a lot of traction on. People look to
sure.
you for your posts quite often. I think it's been a big thing for you. Move the needle, personally and professionally. Was there a specific shift or change in attitude that ultimately led you to want to use that platform almost on a daily basis, if not on a daily basis?
Yeah, yeah, and I apologize because I'm now I'm thinking about the offices in my mind, and I just
That's
rewatched the
fine.
episode where Michael Scott has the leads from Saber, and he loses them in
Yeah.
the trash can, and that's kind of how I started going on LinkedIn. We were getting leads, and the leads weren't what I needed. It was difficult to get phone numbers and people on traction, and LinkedIn is this weird thing where nearly anyone's accessible. It's like a really big conference,
Hmm.
except for you don't have to go anywhere to go meet those people, and you can go find them and you can go talk to them. And so for a lot of the people that I was calling into, financial advisors, tax advisors, those people were not only accessible, they wanted you to reach out to them because they're kind of like salespeople in some capacity. The more tax advisor talks to someone, our financial advisor talks to someone, the more money they get as well. Their business is more profitable. So I found that my lead source wasn't great, but LinkedIn was this great lead source where I can go really touch and interact with anyone. So that was like, okay, let's try to figure out how I can like leverage this better. So that was like the first like, oh, the light bulb went on. Oh, I can use this better. And it started just as that, like very simplistic. Let's use LinkedIn to get more leads. And
Mm.
then it was like, oh, like not only it is LinkedIn like a source for me to get leads, but it's this weird thing where I have the ability to get in front of really high profile individuals in a meaningful way.
Yeah.
And that's when I started to post more. And as you kind of alluded to, um, what my daily process with LinkedIn, and I'll just go into that just very briefly.
Yeah.
As I look at LinkedIn, as I think about LinkedIn, I think my first thought about LinkedIn, and I think most salespeople, maybe most business owners, first perspective of LinkedIn is this is lead generation, and I think that's um, a overly simplistic way to think about LinkedIn. I think about LinkedIn again like a really big conference. And a really big conference doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to come away with 100 leads. So you have people at a conference who have a booth who just want to, create awareness. You have people at a conference who they come and they actually don't want to create awareness. They don't want to get leads. They just want to know more information. You have people at a conference who come there and all they want to do is get leads. You have people there with some mixtures all in between there. And so now you have the ability to go say, okay, LinkedIn is all of those, right? But it's not just one of those. But now you have to think about like, okay, well, how does that relate to my business today? So if you're selling a $500,000 product, are your is your ideal customer, are they going on LinkedIn and saying, I want to buy a $500,000 product?
Yeah.
Maybe not. But if your product is a super easy plugin, a couple $100, maybe they are, right? And so it's going to be different for every person. But for me, I'm in enterprise sales. I'm selling large ticket items, and the sales cycle is 6 to 8 months. So for me, what I think is a much more meaningful way to approach LinkedIn is demand generation. And that demand generation is for Charles, who happens to work at Experian.
Mm-hmm.
I want people to have a desire to work with me, whether that's personally, they might want to do a side venture, or that's like, business and they want to, be a client of Experian, whether that's, hey, they want to, work at Experian, or maybe I can, help them break into sales. Often I have people reach out to me and say, hey, how do you get into sales? Like, can you help me out? Can you mentor me to some capacity? Or it just might be a situation where I can refer them to a company, and vice versa. They can refer me to a company. And that's why I think the conference mentality is just much more of a healthy or helpful way to consider LinkedIn, because that's what you see at conferences. You have real people interacting with real people,
Yeah.
and you let the opportunities that uh, result from that happen as they may. But lead generation I think is a little bit too static and a little bit too cold to consider LinkedIn,
Mm-hmm.
because you're dealing with humans,
Yeah.
and no one wants to feel like they're just a lead, in my opinion.
Well, if you don't mind me asking, I'd love to hear what your daily or weekly practice is with LinkedIn. I'm always really curious from other content writers or content creators that have found a nice niche in LinkedIn, what their approach is, because I think it's so different for everybody. Do you
Sure.
have something that you kind of do on the regular that allows you to sort of stay locked into the platform?
Yeah, yeah. I actually just read a post that um, kind of made me feel bad, because I do this often, but they talk about posting ghosts, and this is my general posture of LinkedIn, because LinkedIn is like a conference, like anything else. You can get lost in it. It's addicting. It's social media, and so I have a scheduler that I use on a consistent basis to schedule my posts, and so I post every day, 5 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, every day, and then or Monday through Friday, and then um, on the weekends I give some people some little rest, and I post around 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. But I do it every day, and with the scheduler, excuse me, with the scheduler, what I like to do is get all my notes down. So I never feel the need um, to only put a post down or schedule it when it's ready. So I like to have a lot of rough notes, and this is how I always been as a writer. So if I'm going to write an essay, I like to mind dump on the paper and get it there, and then I'll just kind of tease it out as it comes. But I would rather have something there because it makes me feel a little more accomplished there. So today I have literally 25 posts scheduled for the next month of July. They're all scheduled. but most of them are intelligible. Like you would not be able to understand at all what I'm saying. I can, but you would be like, this is garbage. You might still think it's
Yeah.
garbage, but like you would think it's more garbage based on what it's like. But for me, it's important to have it down there because as a prototypical salesperson, I think of administrative skills, like doing something consistently over time. And so for me to be able to schedule it, that helps me do it that way. And then when I, as a content creator, when I get bored or disinterested or just fatigued, I know that I need to do a better job of ingesting good material to be inspired. I
Right.
think that sometimes I do get bored. Sometimes I like a hassle to write and to put out thoughts. Um, but I think that sometimes it's because I'm just ingesting really like weak material. I think we all ingest material, but it's just
Hmm.
like super like disinteresting, like mind like garbage. And
Yeah.
but the more I listen to like thoughtful teachers and speakers and um podcasts, things like that, that helps me ingest more content. And then as I ingest more content, I'm more inspired because I'm like, oh, like that thing is really important. And I know that there's someone that can can benefit from that. And one thing I want to say a little bit, if anyone is out there and they want to start writing on LinkedIn, they want to start um, engaging people on content. I would say the best thing you can do today, if you want to start writing on LinkedIn, is not write on your own posts, right? But to comment on people's posts. And I say that because it doesn't require you to come up with something from zero, from scratch. That person has already given you the raw material. Now you go and post meaningful responses to that person. And as a salesperson, the best way you can do this, if you're saying, hey, I want to be a thought leader in cybersecurity, identity theft, credit monitoring, whatever it might be, you have your specific industries. Find the hashtag, find the influencer in that space, and hit the notification bell so you know every time they post. Be the first comment on there and post something meaningful to them. Like it, respond, and it can't just
Hmm.
be awesome, good job, or thanks. It has to be something meaningful that you thought about, and I promise you, that'll be your starting of writing on LinkedIn. I would
Mm.
probably say that that piece of engagement on LinkedIn is probably more meaningful even than posting yourself. And I say that because if you watch, I'm a big sports person, as many of you know. So if you watch House of Highlights or any kind of viral video on Instagram, most of us immediately go to the comment section after we watch that video. And then we start to interact with the comments or at least read the comments because community is in the comments. That's where you actually build a real relationship with other people. And and so if you want to start building that community and start to be seen and start to have engagement, you start in the comments, right? I do a bad job, and as I alluded to a little bit before this tirade, is I just post and I ghost a little bit. Like I could do a pretty good job of posting, but the real hard thing is to engage in comments because that's how you build a community, right? You build a tribe of people that you interact with, that you support them and they support you. You're excited for what they're going to write and vice versa. You're excited that their company just got this award and they just got this award, and that's community, right? You're excited for other people genuinely just because you're for them and vice versa.
Yeah.
And I think that's the real trick of social media, right? Like where you can build a tribe of people who are like, I'm just genuinely like pumped for you just because like I'm for you.
Yeah.
So that was a little bit tangent there, but I think that's helpful in my
No,
opinion.
I think it is. I think it is, and I totally align with that because I firmly believe in the 100 true fans or the 1,000 true fans theory,
Mhm.
where you don't necessarily need a million people following you or tuning into what you're saying. If you just have a few hundred folks that you grow over a certain amount of time, I mean that's all it really takes to move the needle. And so I want to use that to pivot into where you are today, because as I've gotten to know you better, I feel like where you've landed is such a nice fit for where you are today. And it's based on your background, it's based on your desire to educate, to inspire people, to really like shepherd people. And there's this trifecta, or maybe even more than trifecta, connection that happens here with regards to where you are, the industry that you help serve, be it, multifamily real estate, kind of, renters, and your ability to share stories, tell stories, inspire people, inspire action.
Mm.
Let's talk about Experian. What's this role meant to you so far, and what are you excited about with the work that you're doing today?
Yeah. Thank you. I love that question, and it goes back to um, that question that I said I asked myself, as I was going into the nonprofit space, is like, hey, like Charles, in an ideal world with no bills, what would you do for free? Well, Experian just put out an initiative at our sales kickoff where, all our kids, we asked our kids, like, hey, like, what does daddy do for work? And, my kids, all of them, they said, the the unanimous response was, dad just eats all day and talks to his friends at work. That's what dad does. And so that answers my question of, ideal world with no bills, what would I do for free? I would eat all day and I would talk to my friends. And I'm just being a little bit facetious there, but I think that's what I enjoy Experience because that story is unrelated to Experience except for it is. There was a video that was put out about how do you involve your kids into like how do they see your role on a day-to-day basis. And I don't that makes me proud of a company that cares to involve my children, and that my children will probably remember to some capacity this whole exercise being done. And then that whole video that I made was strung together with thousands of other Experian employees, and we all got to see it, and we felt connected to each other in a way that we probably wouldn't have otherwise. And but as an aside of like Experian, I came from a low income family where we just didn't understand finances. We didn't get it. And we would do the same things over and over and over and expect a different response, the definition of insanity. And somehow through sports, I was able to become a first generation college graduate. And as a first generation college graduate, I was afforded much more opportunities. But even after I graduated and I was now educated, I get my first apartment, and they get at that time they gave you an option um, uh, to ask for your credit report to be sent to you. And I got my credit report because I was curious, and I had zero concept or clue as to what went into the numbers that I got. They were all misconceived notions as to how that goes. So although I was educated, I was still ignorant uh, as to what went into my credit.
Mm.
And so one of the things that I'm excited about Experian, and why that was a really attractive opportunity to me, was because I see that you could still be an educated person in America and still have zero concept of credit. Now, it may not
Hmm.
affect you as much because you have more money to play with, as opposed to someone who's low income. It still is a sad fact that you have really wealthy individuals who are just in a really bad place financially,
Mm.
as far as their ability to handle their finances because they don't understand their credit or they don't understand even how to manage their finances. And then you have like the low income people who are like they don't even understand how to get ahead or get from where they are now because
Yeah.
it's almost as if everyone has a ball to play at the playground and they don't even understand the rules of the game. So
Yeah.
they can't even get in and go play wall ball with everyone else because like they just don't get it. They don't know where it is. And so I love Experience for that fact because we pride ourselves at teaching people how to build credit, how to understand credit, like making it less cryptic and demystifying credit because it shouldn't be complicated. But I think it is complicated for many people because high school, middle school, parents, system, You blame it on whoever you want, but people are not being taught it. And I
I'm
will kind
gonna.
of go ahead.
No, go
Go ahead.
ahead. Go ahead, please.
No, and I was just gonna say, explain like very quickly, like all credit is it's just saying, hey, Charles loaned money to Chris, and um Charles asks another buddy of Chris, let's say Rob, um, for money as well. Well, Rob reaches out to you, Chris, and he says, hey, did Charles pay back that money? And if he did it take 3 years? Did he pay it back when he told you? And Rob needs some kind of assurance that if he loans money to me, that he's going to get it back.
Hmm.
And ultimately, that's all credit is. And I think that there's a misnomer. And it's like it's confusing to people because people are often people like at conferences. People always ask me like, "Hey, you work at Experian, can you fix my credit?" That's people ask me that all the time, like literally all the time, and they're being facetious in some capacity. I think some people are serious too, but we're really just the ledger, right? We're just demonstrating, oh, like, did you pay your bills? Did you not pay your bills? And now there's some aspects of just the system of credit, historically speaking, that are that we are starting to see that we didn't see, in the past that we're trying to um, fix. Right. One of those things is that we have a product called Experian Lift. And Experian Lift or Experian Boost and Experian Go. Some of those products are really put in place for immigrants, right? So if you came over to the States, our credit system is super weird. Like not, so it's not only just weird to us here, but they're like, you want me to go into debt to to prove
Right.
that I'm good with credit, even though I
Hmm.
pay all my bills? That's weird. And so we have products like that that are helping to recognize what we call credit invisibles, people who like don't have any credit, and give them credit so they can actually start playing in our financial system, right? And I like to think of it as a game. Like
Mm.
it's a game because you come over here as an immigrant and you're like, why do I want to play that game? That doesn't seem very fun.
Yeah.
I don't want to play that game. And especially like some African countries, like it's really bad to have debt. America is really weird, but we think debt is a kind of a good thing, and so it's kind of counterintuitive to some people. But those are things that we're putting together. But you were having a question, Chris, as well?
Well, I was going to say, I was going to go where boldly no man has gone before. And I was going to
Mm.
call back The Office for a third time in this podcast. And I was going to relate it to a scene where Michael says, explain it to me like I'm a 5-year-old. Explain it to me like I'm five.
Yeah.
And what I'd love to get your perspective on from someone in the credit space, you already started to do this, but also as someone in multifamily who engages with owners and operators, and you're trying to make sure that those renters have some of these tools at their disposal. What would you say are your like top 2 or 3 takeaways for building credit? Are there any education bombs here that you can drop at that 5-year-old level, just in case someone's listening who's like, I don't really know that myself. I wish he would maybe give me some insights and some help. What would be a couple takeaways that come to mind?
Good question. So I think always pay your bills, right? We know that, like, pay your bills. I would say if you like, generally, yourself. Like, if you're honest, if you are a spender or a saver, right? If you are a spender, I would say you probably don't need credit cards. You probably want to go to Dave Ramsey way, right? So I did Financial Peace University, and I wouldn't agree with everything with Dave Ramsey because Dave Ramsey would tell you cut all your credit cards. I would say that if you are a spender and you are in a huge amount of debt, you probably should cut all your credit cards, right? That's probably a good spot for you until you can get the wherewithal to have good habits regarding spending. But um, most of credit woe is because we are um, our eyes. My mom used to always tell me like your eyes are bigger than your stomach, right?
Hmm.
Um, and so you go into the food line, maybe the buffet, and you get this huge mound of stuff, and you eat like a quarter of it. And in the same capacity with our finances, you know, we live in a capitalistic society that is intended to for you to buy stuff. And it used to be that that was intended for you to buy stuff in store. Now it's intended for you to buy stuff from your couch, which puts us in a very perilous situation
Hmm.
because we are just buying stuff like all the time. So I would say pay your bills, live within your means, right? Um, so for multifamily renters, I'm from California. I live in California. There was a point in time where my rent was more than half of my take home, right? Gross. That meant that I needed to be very meager on what I bought because as I budgeted, like half of my take home was just out no matter what because of rent. So I had very little things that I could do. So I would say, pay your bills, um, uh, don't spend more than you make, and budget. Like, do some kind of
Mm.
budget. There's a lot of free budgets out there that will help you do too a little bit better, right? Because I think that, like, my suspicion is that most people just um, like don't know where their money goes. So they're like, dang, why don't I have any money this month? Like, I just got paid. And they're just so confused by it. I remember like specifically a couple years ago, I was like, dude, why don't I have any money? And I went through and I did all the math and I was like, I'm spending like 800 bucks going out every month. Like,
Mm.
and I'm like, this is like not that many kids. Like now I got a lot of kids, so that might be normal. But like I had like one or two kids, and I just wanted to go out. And so I think that once you get a clear picture, and I think that this is how I think about credit, right? So if you're in multifamily, all the way that credit plays a role for you is that as a landlord, you want a clear picture of who you're doing business with. So if I have someone as a landlord come and sleep in my room, I just want to know what their credit's like. So I have a good idea of like, are they going to pay me or not? Not only that, I want to know if they just robbed the liquor store, I would just like to know that, right? You want a good picture of who you're dealing with as they're coming into your house. And for you as a person dealing with credit or your tenants dealing with credit, you want like we need to have a good idea of our finances. Because if we don't understand like where money is going, meaning that every year or every month my money has a home, right? It has to go to this person, has to go to this person, and every dollar has a place. And so I make sure I assign that. Now that's the hard part, right? So the reason why people stink with their finances is because handling your finances are is complicated. It changes on a monthly basis and we want very convenient automated solutions. Now there are some out there, right, that will go and automate it for you. And I would say go look at them. Like go look at some of those automated sources. Experian has one. A lot of people use our free one. Mint has one. There's a couple out there where it'll go and say, okay, you log into your account, and then it'll say, "This is your expenses. This is your take home pay. Guess what? You're spending way too much money. You need to stop spending money." And they'll tell you that, right? But I would say have some plan in place. My suspicion is that many of us just have no plan, and sometimes that's okay because you're making enough money. Um, but I think sometimes something happens and it throws a wrench in our plans, and now we are a little bit put in a rock in a hard place.
Yeah.
So I would say, spend less, um, pay your bills, have some kind of money management like plan and strategy in place. Budget. If you got to go old school Excel, go Excel. Um, but I would actually recommend that like some kind of like YNAB, Mint, Experian offer like is better because what it's going to do is it's going to take your transactions and go put them somewhere for you online. And Excel is hard because it's static. So you're going to say, "Oh, I spent $7 at Aldi, $7 at Wegmans, or whatever it is," and it's going to be difficult to actually um, it's going to be difficult for you to actually manually put it in there. You're going to want that to be automated. So for us, like we talk about all the AI. We want to use AI and automation as much as possible, so we don't have to be stuck in doing the rudimentary stuff. But you also need to understand that AI will never replace humans, in my opinion, because there's unique things that only we can do. But let's use it as much as possible. If it can make your life easier and more, convenient, let's use it. And so that would be my top three. I think that, um, and also like lastly, just realize you're in a capitalistic society that um is trying to figure out how I can get your money, right? At the end of the
Absolutely.
day, like there's a bunch of businesses that are either saying, "Hey, how can I get your money or your time?" Right? And so know that. And I think we do know that. I just think that we kind of forget. So we're like, oh, I really want a burger. Well, you probably just got primed to that burger. Like this is marketing that play.
Hmm.
So maybe you want that burger, but maybe it was really good marketing, copy there as well. But that's probably a little too much tangential. But that's what I would kind of say for multifamily, how I would kind of handle credit. And I think that credit is going to be um, much more of a player in the next kind of couple years because I'm hearing big PMSs start having more conversations about credit and how because they interface with tenants so often and they're starting to
Yeah.
ask for it. I imagine it's going to start becoming more of a big thing in multifamily.
Yeah. Yeah. No, super helpful tips. And I think I agree. There's been a lot more emphasis on credit across multifamily over the last couple of years. Definitely seeing some tools pop up and some aspects of larger platforms that are focusing on those credit aspects on behalf of renters. Super helpful. Charles, this has been really enlightening and really fun to chat with you. I really appreciate you coming on. I mean, I always love the last couple questions here because it's like a rapid fire,
Yeah,
give me what you got kind of situation. So,
yeah,
couple fun ones for you just to end up here. I wanna hear from you because you've had so many cool experiences in your life. Best movie of all time, but that has to do with credit. Hit me with
yeah.
what comes to mind.
Yeah, so that's a hard question. I was looking at it, I was thinking about like, man, is there one? I don't know. That so the two movies that came to mind for me, and this is cheating a little bit. My best movie of all time that has to do with not credit but money is Pursuit of Happiness,
Yep.
and sells a little bit as well. And for me, like I cried in that Will Smith movie as a dad. Like that thing just brought me to tears. So that's number
Mm,
one. And then two is Tetris. So Tetris just came out, and it's a movie that if you haven't watched it yet, he needs to build some kind of like line of credit with the owner of Nintendo, in order for him to actually get the rights of Tetris. Now it's not
mm,
traditional credit, but it's untraditional credit where he needs to go to Nintendo and say, "Hey, I'm good for it, and can you actually put your name for me so I can actually get the right of Tetris?" And that's kind of like the story of Tetris, where he kind of goes in there and he works some relationships where he can just parlay after some networking to actually go get the rights to go buy Tetris.
mm.
So and I never knew that until about 6 months ago when it came out on Apple TV. I think that's a really fun one to watch as well.
I didn't either. Okay.
Yeah.
That's really great recommendation. What about a book? I don't know. Are you a big reader? Are you an avid reader at all? But tell me your favorite book that you would recommend to listeners
Yeah.
and obviously why.
Yeah. So I'm a big reader in a weird way. I'm a big audiobook listener. So I haven't really read a bunch of physical books as of late. But my favorite book, one of my favorite books is Malcolm Gladwell's David and Goliath. And essentially the premise on that is that all your disadvantages are actually advantages. So he kind of talks about you know, the challenge of like maybe as someone growing up poor, right? Like maybe like myself, and maybe, become like somewhat upper class, middle class, whatever it is. And the challenge of, or the reality that they were successful because of the challenges they had or the disadvantages that they had growing up. And then he
Hmm.
also talks about the caveat of, well, how do you actually make your kids successful? Because they no longer possess those disadvantages that you had as a kid,
Right.
right? And so you see it's like in professional athletes often, right? Professional athletes often come from rags to riches, but then the challenge is like, how do you actually manufacture the the turmoil that you had as a kid for your kids because they don't have it. Like your
Right.
dad's a professional athlete, right? So it's a super unique book because of that, because it talks about those outliers that you never really thought about, and and it kind of gives you a little psychological insight into like success.
Yeah. Man, I feel like we could do a whole separate podcast with some dads and talk about how to address that question. That kind of hit me in the gut a little bit, but we'll have to do that another time.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
Charles, it's been a pleasure. There's only one more thing to do for you, and that is to roll out the red carpet. Tell the world what you're up to, where they can find you online, and follow up with you if they want to do that.
Yeah. So appreciate that. Thanks for listening in, everyone. I'm with Experian. I basically work in I do all things rental. So most of my focus is on screening solutions. So identity verification, credit profiles, verification of income, background history. That's typically my day to day. And where you can find me, I'm often on LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out, send me a note, DM, reach out that way. That's the majority of my presence. Would love to interact with many of you guys in person. And if there's anything I can do, please reach out. I think it's fun. All the people you get to meet through LinkedIn. Like I said, it's a big conference to me.
Awesome. Charles, thank you so much again.
No problem. Thank you guys.